don't care. And it's like been widely like spread.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh.
The burrito, now the light.
And then whenever you're ready, you can start. But I have one question. Do you want me to start on just you or on the why?
Wide would be good. I think I have like a little thing I'm trying to do for this podcast that's a little different.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm ready.
No pressure. No pressure.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Danny Miranda, and I'm trying something new. Okay, so we just recorded for your podcast, which is called Danny Miranda, right? And we talked about how, so you're a podcaster. We just recorded your 285th
85th
episode, and I told you this earlier, and I really genuinely mean it. Your podcast, I really respect and admire. Like, what you're doing, your guests. I met him for the first time today, and I was like, you're a Twitter guy, because I could just tell from your guests. So our conversation covered a lot of things, including kind of how I am currently in the cringe process of my podcast, listening over to my podcast, because this will be, I think, episode number 7 or 8. I think it's 7. So one of the things that I find very most difficult is the introduction, which I just watched you do. You just sat and did it after our conversation, which I respect a lot because you just did it. And I want to play around with co-creating your intro. Also because you're a podcaster, I want to see how you tell your story and how you introduce yourself, because I kind of think that's something I've been thinking more of lately. I just went to this event called Summit, and I don't think I had a way or a story about myself that I used to introduce myself. So I kind of want to see what your story is. And then it's also just really easy for me to not have to make an intro that I have to overthink.
Yeah. Well, my name's Danny Miranda. I'm a podcaster. I run a show called the Danny Miranda Podcast, and I've interviewed now over 280 incredible minds, thinkers, creators, entrepreneurs, and I just feel really blessed every day to be able to wake up and do something that I love and get paid for it. It's just a dream come true. I'm incredibly grateful, and I view each day as just how can I love life today? And the podcast is just my way of doing that. So that's a little intro. You know, I like to introduce myself as like a lover of life. And that's really what it's all about for me. And I just, through the podcast, I hope I can instill that in other people as well.
Beautiful. So you grew up here, where?
Long Island, New York.
And you are 27.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your journey from maybe high school onwards to this point?
Yeah. So in college, I was very much like, how can I not care about anything? I was very hedonistic. Let me party. Let me drink.
Where did you go to college?
Binghamton University in upstate New York. And I didn't really have a clear purpose. I didn't have a clear direction in life. And I didn't have any way of like knowing what I actually wanted to do. And looking back on it, I think it's because my whole life up to 2019 was very externally facing. Meaning I was always looking outside. How do other people look at me? What should I do to appeal to other people? And it was only when I started looking internally did I start to find myself, find the things that were inherent to me, find my own passions. What do I care about when I'm alone by myself? What is the thing that lights me up? And so I went to college, you know, very externally facing, very partying, you know, drinking, a lot of things that weren't feeding my soul. Graduate college. All right, I don't want to work for anyone. Let me try e-commerce. Let me just try to sell things. Let me try to make money really quickly. Like that idea. And then at some point I was like, this isn't fulfilling to me. This isn't what is feeding my soul. This isn't actually, if I died today, I'd be upset because I was not doing something that really fed me at a deep level. And I just decided, okay, like let me stop doing this. And that was a very difficult decision, but let me stop doing this and let me start to go inward. Let me look at myself. Started meditating 20 minutes in the morning every day, starting in October 2019. And slowly, like, better habits started building. I then decided, oh, I want to be a personal trainer. Let me get into fitness. Like, I've always been into fitness from like 2017 onwards. Let me help other people with that journey. Then I was like, all right, this isn't me. There's not enough ideas in here. Let me start writing. Like, COVID hit, and I was like, let me start writing. Then the writing led to, let me talk to people.
What did you write on? Did you post your writing?
Yeah, DannyMiranda.com. I have a bunch of different articles. I was writing 2 articles a week on just like how to find your passion, how to how to build habits that are sustainable, how to meditate, all these. I did a 60-day meditation challenge, Naval's 60-minute meditation challenge, which was really impactful. And then after that, in July of 2020, I said, who wants to talk on the phone, to Twitter. There was about 10,000 people who followed me, 8 to 10,000 people who follow me on Twitter. And I was like, why do these people follow me? I'd love to connect with them. I'd love to learn about them. And from that, I said, okay, like, these phone calls are amazing. Why don't I record them? Those recorded phone calls became the podcast. And 280 plus episodes later, we're sitting here today.
That's fascinating. So what was the initial purpose of the phone calls?
The phone calls were to explore
just who's following you.
Who's following me? Why are they following me? And who are they? Who is this person at a deep level? How are they dealing with COVID? How are they dealing with being quarantined for 4 months? Like, what's going on in their part of the world? I talked to people from the UK, Australia, India, the US, all parts of the US. And I learned. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is happening here. This is how this person is dealing with this situation. And I was like, there's someone out there who would benefit from this conversation. Let me record it.
So how many phone calls did you have? And was the purpose like truly just to learn about the people following you at first? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, probably I would say at least 20.
Okay.
Random people and people that I never met, people that I've never talked to. And it was turned.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I've been, so I have like my YouTube following.
Yeah.
And I used to like really never, because I need help in so many things. Like even for my podcast, I'm like, I need cover art. I went to like Fiverr, whatever, and I absolutely hated whatever they came out with it. And so I recently started just being like, why don't I just go to my network of people that follow me? And that has been kind of life-changing. It's like manifesting, and they already know who you are. So I think that's fascinating. I think that really interesting things can come from that. And I'm trying to do more of that actually, where I like just interact with, those people who actually even want to talk to me. Before I just didn't even have the idea to do that and connect with them. But I want to go back to when you said you in college maybe were very externally facing. So did you have the awareness at the time that you were very externally or looking externally for maybe like validation or just the actions that you were doing? And what was like your tower moment, your realization of that?
Yeah. I feel like there were pockets of time where I knew I was doing the wrong thing, but I was getting so much validation from friends. And
what did that feel like, just knowing that you were not doing on the path that you wanted to be on?
What do you mean?
Like, how did you know? Was it like, oh, you were just like self-reflecting, like, oh, I'm hungover or something?
Yeah, it was just like, all right, like I know that I just drank alcohol 4 days of the week here, and I know that in the moment it felt good, but I knew on Sunday it didn't feel good. I knew I shouldn't be taking drugs to go to sleep. I knew that I couldn't go to sleep unless I was on something. And that to me was like, all right, something's wrong here. But like also, like I have great friends, and like this is the thing about like making a change. It's like sometimes like the environment is toxic, but it's rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's like rewarding, like the friends that I made are friends to this day. And I'm still great. So it's like such a complicated thing, like making a change. And I have a real, because I know that some parts of people they're being like, it's almost like there's two sides. And we often say like, oh, you're doing all these negative habits. And like, maybe that's true, but like also maybe it's like positive in a way that we don't often think about.
Explain more.
Yeah. I mean, like I made friends and I have connections with people who are not like toxic people, who are really thoughtful, interesting people who I'm so grateful to be friends with today from that experience.
Mhm.
And I didn't need to drink, I didn't
Yeah.
need to do all those things, but like it also was beneficial in a way.
Yeah.
So it was like it's a dual nature. And that's the thing about doing the podcast so much. You see the dual nature in people, you see the dual nature in situations, and it makes you a much more nuanced thinker of like, all right, you're doing these, like probably before doing the podcast, I'd be like, all right, I was doing all these bad habits. I should have like stopped. Well, like maybe, but like maybe like that was serving me in some way for my character.
That's actually something I've been thinking about a lot recently. It's kind of like, I feel like society is kind of thinking about that more, even like the anti-hero type idea. But it's like a lot of the time you look at your habits, or you're just like, you shame yourself. Like if you're like, for example, drinking a lot, and you're like, okay, I just spent like another whole weekend of drinking. But yeah, I think it's not like a black or white spectrum. But it's really easy to look at it that way. But a lot of the time there is something, or you're just experiencing, or maybe you had to go through that experience. Like there's like a lot of, I'm not saying that this is true for you, but like a lot of alcoholism and addiction in my life, just like growing up in Alaska and just like genetically. But it's like that entire process still brings you to where you are today.
1000%. And what I've also realized is like having information and being knowledgeable about something is really just having a clear picture of that thing. For example, like let's say if I think about somebody from Alaska, I only have really one person to go to be like, oh, an Alaskan is like this, and that would be you. But someone from Alaska, for you means something completely different.
Yeah.
You've met hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people from Alaska.
Yeah.
So you're much more informed, and you have much more nuanced perspective on that thing. And I think that's like for all things in life, is like some people have more in-depth knowledge about certain things, and some people have less in-depth knowledge because they have less experience with that. So I think it's just important to keep in mind in general, where before we're going to like label X people are like this or Y situations like that, is like getting really clear
Yeah.
on that situation by like zooming in on it.
That reminds me of our conversation about connecting, like conversations and connecting that we had in your podcast. That was a good conversation. We were basically talking about the same concept for just people and like bringing greater awareness or understanding with different people. So you say that meditation changed your life.
Yeah.
That's like the one mindfulness practice that I can't really seem to get into, or I haven't.
Really? That surprises me.
Yeah, and I would like to get more into it. So how did you first get into it, and how has it impacted your life? And also, I didn't know that Naval had like a meditation thing. Can you speak more on that for me?
Yeah, for sure. So I got into meditation because my friend Tej Dosa, Twitter friend, never met him in real life.
That's
He's
amazing.
the first episode of my podcast, and also has appeared on the show, I think 3 times, and I've been on his podcast. I noticed something was different about him. I was like, what? Why is he tweeting differently? What's going on in his mind? Why is it different? And I knew that one practice that was very impactful for him was meditating. He'd been meditating for like 10 years. And so I said, you know what? If it's good enough for Tej, I'll give it a try. I noticed something different in his thinking. Maybe it's something that he's doing. Like a lot of the times, look at what someone's doing that you respect and just do what they're doing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resistance
That's
off
a
to
really
doing that.
basic but very good advice.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, 20 minutes in the morning, every morning, no matter what, first thing before looking at my phone.
And what does that look like? Is it just like you sitting in bed?
No. So I'm happy you asked that and clarified. It's me getting a timer out, and like an actual timer that you get on Amazon or at like like Target or whatever, because having a timer makes sure that you don't check your phone first, because a lot of people use their phone as a timer and then they'll go into social media or their
So you go straight to meditating.
Yes.
You don't even check your phone.
Correct. No checking of the phone. First thing, get the timer out and put the timer. I did it on the floor for a lot of times, and then I did it in a chair. But when I was starting, I was just on the floor. Timer, 20 minutes, preset. Click the button, just sit down and just watch Watch what goes on. See what comes up. You don't need to judge it. You know, your mind will go in all different places. Just watch. That's what's happening on the day to day. Your mind is going out all different places, but we don't watch it often. We're not aware of it, what the mind is doing. So I just watched it, and I did that over and over and over again. And I was like, this isn't doing anything. Like, this is like, I've been doing it for October. I started November, December. December, I go home, and I'm driving a car for the first time. I was living in San Diego. I didn't have a car. And in December, after 3 months of doing it, I'm driving a car for the first time. I stop at a red light, and I notice where my mind's going. I'm like, why won't this light be red? Like, why won't this light be green? What's going on? Come on. Like, oh, this is crazy. I just noticed that thought because I've been meditating. And from there, I was hooked. I was like, oh, this actually works. Because I was able to redirect my thoughts in that moment from, okay, the light is red and I'm anxious about that, to, oh, I don't need to be anxious about that. And that translates to everything, not just when the light is red.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess I meditate in different ways. Like, I do yoga a lot, but that even reminds me of our conversation about like the awareness of creating even online. There's like something that you need to, awareness is knowledge. And if you don't have the awareness of even where your thoughts are going, then you don't have control over like your emotions, probably your actions. So you would say that was like that's something that's life-changing for you.
1000%. I mean, it's like, and then it got deeper and deeper, right? Like, it was 20 minutes in the morning. Then COVID hit and it was quarantine. So I was like, all right, let me do 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. Then it was like, all right, I'm doing 40 minutes of meditation anyway. Why don't I do 60 minutes just in the morning first thing? Because Naval said that this is a good thing to do. And I was like, all right, let me try for 60 days. And you could go back on my website and see how my mind is operating on the 60 days. Because I logged every day after meditating. Like, this is what my mind was thinking. This would happen.
That's really cool.
And I definitely was a different person at the end of it than I was in the beginning.
Okay, so we also talked about how the content that you consume, you can tell a lot about a person. Like, for me, we talked about like Tim Ferriss and Naval.
Yeah.
I always reference Naval, and I said in your podcast, like, a lot of the time, I just like kind of absorb people's takeaways. What are the things that you like about, what are some of the thoughts that you like of Naval's?
Yeah, so one that pops to mind right away is you can either code or create media, and that is the two ways in which you can advance in the modern world. And I thought that was so fascinating, and it blew my mind. And in that moment, I was like, all right, I don't need to code anymore. And you probably maybe had a similar realization when I'm like, all right, like, I can.
You also try coding?
I did
boot camp.
I did.
I gave up.
Yeah, I did. I did for like 2 weeks, and I was like, this isn't for me. Like, I want to communicate with people. I want to learn from people. I want to express myself online. But this is good to know that this isn't for me.
Yeah.
My brother is a coder. My brother worked for LinkedIn, now has his own startup and called Cardio. Check it out and download the app. But I was like, I was blown away by that understanding of like, wow, Max and I both did our own version of creating leverage, and we didn't consciously choose it that way. Like, we both looked at the world and was like, all right, I want to code, or I want to create media. And it's just like, that was natural to us.
That's really funny because I did a coding boot camp for, I think, like at least 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And the whole time I really wanted to make it work because I'm just like, oh, and I will say, like, coding is the first time that it opened up like a whole portal of a new universe. Like, I was just like, this is a different world that I don't understand. But I learned that there are some people who it just kind of comes more naturally for. And
like
I
the
was
30-year-old woman in your coding boot camp.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I was like, this is not my strength. And I spend so much time on my computer making content anyways, I think. And when I heard that podcast, I was just like, this makes so much sense to me. But my sister recently, or not even recently, she's been working on this like dating app for like the last year. And she literally taught herself how to code because she was just working on this project. And I was like, okay, this is clearly like for you. Like, but I was just like impressed by the fact that she like literally learned how to code because she had this idea. So I have like a similar story.
So wait, our siblings both are coding their own apps.
Yeah.
That's weird.
They should meet. They should talk about that journey.
Definitely.
We're like doing a podcast now. They should like just have a phone podcast.
A coders retreat together.
You mentioned in that description like building leverage. What can you explain that?
Yeah. So it's one of the most important ideas that I don't think we think a lot about, especially in the modern world, in that what you're doing right now, like what people are doing, is either helping them create some sort of leverage or it's not. And what I mean by that is like there are skills and there are ideas, and it's like, how do you get that into more minds or more hearts? And it's like creating content online is one way to create more awareness. Leverage is just like the ability to do more with less. You post one Instagram story and I don't know, maybe 10,000 people, you would know better than me, like a crazy number of people will see a post that you put out. That's leverage. You're just pressing one button and it's getting into the minds and hearts of a lot of people. And so you could do that with code because Spotify is coded and that is going onto all the phones, or you could do that with media. Media is just is just on top of the code. And it's an interesting thing that I really haven't like thought a lot about consciously because I feel like it's just part of how I operate.
Yeah.
In that I'm trying to, and also the other thing is like networks are leverage as well. The greater the network.
Well, he uses this term, I believe, called like asymmetric opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you maybe like, I think a lot of what you're saying is like very related to that.
Yeah.
So talk about the network with like maybe asymmetric opportunities.
For sure. So when you have a network, it's like the more connection points in a network, the greater chance it has at survival. And this is true for like social media apps, like in general. Like the more phones that are downloading Instagram, the stronger Instagram is. It has a lot of connection points. So think about this like for a podcaster, right? That's how I think about it. I've interviewed 280 people. Well, that's a lot of connection points that they have to me now, which makes my network stronger. And the reason why I put out so many episodes is one, I love talking to people, but two, I am connecting to so many people, which is making myself stronger and my perception stronger, my ability to communicate stronger, but also the people are almost like encircling around me to propel me higher. You know this person, someone that I've interviewed knows that person, and all of a sudden it like all comes together and it becomes stronger.
I really like that because I've literally never thought about connecting points, building a stronger network, or the idea of a strong network, like literally physically strong.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned in your podcast, I'm like very interested in this idea of building community online because I think I'm interested just in community in general. And for YouTube, a lot of the time it's like you and a camera one-on-one. And so this past year, I've been introducing like different people and like building this digital community. And it is kind of true. Like the reason I said in your podcast, like one, there are two benefits. I don't even remember what the two were, but do you remember?
Benefits to what?
To building this network. No. You said, how do you not make your YouTube just like yourself and like creating this basically show that's just about yourself.
Yeah.
Like, how do you prevent doing that? And I said, I think there are two things, like taking breaks and then building community.
Yeah.
And that's kind of exactly going back to your point of like building a stronger community. It helps everyone in the community if you have a strong community too. Because then it's like, my example is like, if I want to take a break, but I still want to be active on the platform, then I could appear in other people's videos. Or even like there's a huge kind of disconnect in like a lot of the payments that people get. Like if you're at this level, you'll get this much money, but if you're at this level, you'll get like this much money. So I even think that there's like opportunity in building a community of being like, okay, I have this sponsorship. I want to work with other people. I want to build this community. Like I can pay you to be in my sponsored ad, whatever. So it's like literally exactly what you said, like creating a stronger network entirely.
Yeah. And also I think about it is like your videos, every video that you put out is an additional point in the network.
Hmm.
And the because somebody who puts out 10 YouTube videos is more likely to quit and stop posting at all than somebody who's posted 1,000.
Yeah.
Because somebody who's posted 1,000 is going to probably post another 1,000 and is probably doing it for reasons that like they've seen the ways in which the network has manifested to help them.
Hmm.
And it's like whatever content, let's say someone is a creator who's listening to this, it's like you put out more, you're actually increasing the strength of your own network, the network of your social media profile itself.
Yeah.
Like it's becoming stronger just by virtue of you putting out more.
That's a good kind of reminder for like the perfectionist
Yes.
thinking, because I'm a perfectionist, and so that would hinder me a lot. I had a lot of resistance to posting.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing Vlogmas right now, because I'm like, you're forced to post every single day basically.
Yeah. Well, on that point, it's like what I found often from creators who have been successful doing one thing, it's then hard for them a lot of the times to do something else that isn't related, that sometimes has them start at ground zero.
Mhm.
Because when they were starting their initial thing, they didn't have any expectations.
Mhm.
But after you've done something for 10 years and you're successful at it, now you start a new thing and you're like, oh, I'm back at zero. Will people judge me? Will I not be as relevant? Will
Yeah.
people care? And it's like, how can you take that mindset of yourself at 16 years old, yourself just posting that first video? I remember when I was first posting these podcasts, I was like, I don't care if anyone watches. I don't care about anything. I just care about putting myself out there. I just care about the conversation itself. I try to hold on to that as much as I can, even after 280 episodes, and even when I'm going into TikTok for the first time or YouTube or whatever. It's just like that beginner's mindset, day zero, day one, and not judging yourself too harshly for starting something new.
Yeah. I think I'm lucky because I think I am at that point where I'm just like, I don't really care if anyone sees this.
Yeah.
I'm just making, I mean, that's, now I have like more eyeballs, and so that's a different story. But I feel like I'll always, for all of my like content, just be like, you know, I'm making this kind of for me.
Yeah.
You said, you used the word manifest, which I think is really interesting. So I think if you're posting online,
Mm-hmm.
it is it's a method of manifestation. And I think it's really interesting because you can actually see sometimes how your posting can manifest like either the life you want to live or something that you want to accomplish. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think like everything we do is a manifestation of something, right? It's like I go to drink the water bottle. I manifested me drinking that water bottle because it's like, what happened? First, it was a thought in my head. I'm thirsty. Then it was like, oh, let me grab this water bottle. Let me drink it. That's a manifestation in a very small sense. And everyone's manifesting all the time. How do you think things become, or thoughts become things? It's like they first were ideas, and now we have buildings. And now it's like some people get really excited, rightfully so, when you go into New York City because they understand, whether or not they are actually thinking this way or not, that those buildings were just once thoughts in someone's head, and now they're manifested into reality. And it's so magnificent that it stops people.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that like thought process for manifestation.
So we can do that all the time. Like we can do that in little ways, like drinking the water bottle. We can do that in big ways. Like I want the Danny Miranda podcast will get 1 million downloads per month. Like that's possible, right? But it's just like, are you willing to sit in that?
Yeah.
And the length of time. I think a lot of times what happens is people will have these ideas for what they want, and then they'll be like, nah, like I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. I have some blockage. I shouldn't receive this at this moment. So let me stop thinking that. Let me sabotage myself in some way. So I stop thinking that, and then I do something else. And it's easy too with the ADD mind of social media for us to be like, okay, like I'm thinking about this, and then I'm now thinking about that, and I completely forgot about A. So my idea is like, how can I sit in the reality of something that I truly want? And how, if I come back to it often, if I really want that, let me just have that in my mind at all times and watch that become a reality.
Okay, so we listened to the maybe same podcast with the art of the War of Art.
Yes, Stephen Pressfield and Joe Rogan.
Yes.
Incredible podcast episode. I highly recommend it.
Okay, so what you're talking about, you seem to mention a lot about like resistance. So how does resistance manifest in your life, and what do you do to get over it? Because if you sit in the resistance, you cannot manifest on the internet
Yeah.
or anywhere, really.
Yeah. I would say the resistance in my life has happened when I've been very externally focused. Right? I was having a lot of resistance in college. I was having a lot of resistance right after college because I wasn't looking internally at what I actually wanted and valued. I was doing things. I was going to college because I thought that's what my parents wanted. And so I was like inside fighting that reality because I hadn't looked at that reality and I wasn't courageous enough to act on it. So every time that I face resistance or I do face resistance is I'm getting too focused on the external. Like, and a more recent example, which could be helpful, is like I was doing this job in December of 2021 and this was like an NFT podcasting job. And after 3 months of doing it, I realized I didn't like doing this. Like this wasn't feeding my soul in any way, but I continued to do it because I didn't want to let other people down. I wasn't really like looking at myself. And so for a month, I quit the job in December. For a month, I was just didn't post a single podcast, wasn't content in life, wasn't happy, was very down. And if you look back on that and reflect on it, it's like the resistance for not posting a single podcast episode was because I was externally facing for 3 months and I was not looking at myself enough.
So how do you look at yourself? Because for me, it's like comes through journaling.
Yeah.
Is yours through like meditation or
Yeah.
how?
Yeah, mainly through meditation, but I've also done morning pages, just writing 750 words in the beginning of the day, just watching the thoughts. We spoke about journaling on our podcast episode, which was awesome. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like, am I giving myself space to think about the things that I've done and why I'm doing them?
Okay, so part of the reason why I wanted to have you on my podcast is because obviously I'm just starting this podcast. So I'm going to ask you about your process.
Please.
Okay, so so curating your list of people, how do you come up with people that you want to have on your podcast? And like, who's your dream? Do you have an answer for your like dream podcast guest?
Yeah, I mean, so how I come up with people to talk to is like follow my own curiosity. I've always been interested in media since I was 13 years old and writing about Gary Vaynerchuk in 2009.
You have a fun journey.
It's like, it's crazy. When I look back, I'm like, oh, this was like destined to be this way. But I consume a bunch. I consume wide. I consume video. I consume audio. I consume text in written form, books and tweets. And I'm like, who's interesting to me? Who do I genuinely want to talk to? Who am I curious about? Who is living a life that's interesting to me? Who is living a life that's not interesting to me? And like, how can I learn more about it? So I just follow my curiosity and I ask people on who I'm curious about and I just let it rip and then talk to them. And that's pretty much it. And then like dream podcast guests are like people who have impacted my life at a deep level. Someone is like Mike Posner, right? Mike Posner, I was in a very down moment of my life and I would listen to his music on repeat, Keep Going, I think his album. And that really like impacted me at a deep level. People like Russ or Big Sean, those are like artists. But then like podcasters like Tim Ferriss, Naval is definitely on that list. Joe Rogan. I look for people who have impacted me at a deep level and try to share what they've given me and share it with the world.
Yeah. So how do you prepare for your podcasts?
So I normally do anywhere from like 10 to 20 hours of research for each guest and try to consume their content and consume how is this person looking at the world? How is this person, what are the things that they mention on other podcasts that they wish they could talk about more? And how can I
You
bring
did a really good job on that for mine.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And how can I bring those to the forefront? And how can I see part of this person's soul in a way that makes them feel seen and also makes the audience feel like they have a greater understanding and appreciation for that person. That's what I'm trying to do for every episode. I don't always do it, but when I do, it feels really good and it feels like a calling.
Yeah.
Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
So for one of my episodes, who I was like, okay, I know, like, I consumed all the content, I read the books,
Yeah.
like, I was like, this could be a really interesting interview. And I remember I, like, literally had, like, probably 3 pages of notes and, like, questions. And then in an interview, you're facing each other, and it's, like, it can be distracting if you, like, come bring out your iPad and, like, just scroll through it. And kind of the feedback in the conversation, it was like, you know, you don't just prepare. You don't need to bring, like, your list of questions and just, like, go from there.
Yeah.
Do you ever have, like, questions you're just like, I want to ask all of these? Like, do you bring papers? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So sometimes what I learned was that by doing a lot of episodes, I figured out what the right mix was between research and letting it flow.
Mm-hmm.
What I found was like in episode, I think 61, I was talking to Ali Abdal, and I was so prepared that it actually hurt the conversation. And it was that moment. And then like episode, I think 7 or 8 with Ed Lattimore, I was not prepared enough.
Wow.
And so I'm like, all right, okay, I did episode 8 here with this awesome person, and it wasn't as great as I thought it could be because of me.
Yeah.
And then I did episode 61 and it wasn't as great for a completely different reason. How can I like merge those two? And so you do it enough times and you're like, all right, I did my research, but I'm also comfortable letting it flow. And I think I could have only got to that point by doing it as many times as I did personally.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, I think a big part of my not wanting to be seen was not trusting that in the moment, like, I'll do fine. Like, I'm always the person that I am. But a lot of the time, it's like, as an artist or whatever, or creative, you're like, oh, I'll post this when it's ready or when I'm ready.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone, or how do you just, like, sit in the moment and be okay showing up as you are right then and there?
A lot comes down to how do you feel about you? Right? Like, if you are comfortable with yourself, which I am, which I built my way to be.
Yeah.
If I'm comfortable in the moment, and I'm not always, like, but when I am, it is such a beautiful experience that you could say anything and it won't throw me off because I love me for me. And it's like when we overvalue other people's opinions and perspectives, we're not giving ourselves enough room to breathe, and we're not giving ourselves enough love in that moment. And it's very easy to do, especially online, when people have all these perspectives of you. But if you don't know yourself, if you don't love yourself in that moment, you're going to get with the wind. The wind's going to take you from, oh, I should have said this in this moment. I should have said that in that moment. I should have paused more. It's like, I love myself. So it's all good. I can do anything. I can be in any conversation. I could talk to Elon Musk right now. I could talk to a homeless person because I love me. And I don't let their credentials or their lack of credentials make me believe that I'm greater than them or I'm less than them. I'm just me in this moment. And I can talk to anyone because I'm a human being. And I love myself.
That is a great answer. Okay, so one thing that I think is interesting is I have a lot of girlfriends who literally have no guy friends. And my audience is actually pretty split on YouTube. I have a 60-40 audience.
Oh, wow.
Which I think I didn't realize is unique, but I think once you get closer to like half and half, that's pretty unique because guys tend to have a lot of like male dominated audience, women have like female dominated. And so I want to use this platform to connect, people with each other. I've been reading a lot. This conversation somehow reminded me of this, even though it's not completely related. But, like on Instagram, whenever you have all those like psychology like explanations. And so I think a lot of girls struggle with like the good girl persona. And I think guys don't really have that as much, where they feel like they have to like people please, or like they have to live their life and not offend anyone, or they just kind of this is a huge generalization, but they're just kind of more comfortable doing them. What advice would you give to maybe like a good girl who has always like grown up people pleasing and like just doing things maybe not completely for herself, but for other people?
Yeah. I've never heard like the term good girl in that sense. So it's like someone who's a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And somebody, like, could you break down like what that means exactly?
Yeah. I don't even know if it was like that was the proper term, but it's basically just like a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but sometimes people, especially girls, because we live in like a society where it's like, oh, good girls don't interrupt. They don't offend other people. They want to maintain everyone's emotions around them so that they're just not offensive. And I do think guys kind of do a better job. Like, for me, I'm like, oh, I told, just small things. Like, anything, I'm so hyper aware of what how my actions affect other people.
Interesting.
Where maybe some people just don't have that awareness. But I think some people also do have that awareness, and they're just like, well, this is the best thing for me at this current time. I don't even know if you would have advice for that.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I wish my mom was here because my mom, honestly, is like...
Yeah, maybe I should ask this question to the women.
No, well, my mom, it feels like she can walk in any room. Like, I think I got that from my mom, who's a woman, which is interesting, right? Like, she could walk into any room. She could talk to anybody.
So what qualities does she have that make that so?
Yeah, I think she's very confident, but her confidence breeds from her work ethic in the sense of, like, she's very into fitness and she's very into exploring ideas and she's very into like interesting people. And so, like, because of that work that she does, like, she can put herself in any room and I don't think she feels uncomfortable like stating her mind or her perspective. But I would love to know, like, from her perspective, like, how do you like break that stereotype of like being a girl like that and like being a girl who's like more confident? Is that what you would say?
I guess it's not even confidence. It's like more people pleasing.
People pleasing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people pleasing comes down to valuing other people's perspectives more than yourself. Right. And maybe it's ingrained in women more than men to value other people's perspectives. I'm not sure. But I would say that people pleasing ends when, or starts to end when you start to value yourself higher. And you start to value yourself higher as you show examples in the world of you doing things that you value, right? Like, if you value meditating a lot and you actually meditate every day, well, then you value yourself because you're like, wow, I did what I said I'm going to do and I value this action and I value what this action gives me. And therefore I value myself. Same thing with fitness, right? So it's like, if you can pinpoint the values or the things that you admire in other people and then start to do them yourself, you'll people please less because you'll appreciate yourself more.
I actually really like that answer too, because I obviously asked because I'm a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser.
It's all good.
But as I, started doing things that I genuinely love, like whether it's like making more YouTube videos or like starting this podcast, and I have like so many people in my life who want to spend time with me or whatever, want me to do something for them. It's just like at a certain point, like I'm starting to value my time more. So it's just like, I feel bad that I can't come, but it's just like, if I go do whatever you want me to do and I don't value my time as much, then I can't get the stuff that I want to do done. Yeah. It's like valuing, and that to me, when you were saying like you have to value yourself, that's like valuing my time more.
100%. And also it's like, you, like we spoke about, want to write a book at some point. You value the creation of a book or writing in general. Are you writing as much as you value writing? That's a question to ask yourself. It's like, if you did more writing, maybe like you would value yourself more because this is an activity that you appreciate and admire in others. And then you do it yourself and you're like, oh, wow, like look at me. I'm doing what I value in others. Looking for admiration is a very important part in other people because everyone admires somebody. And ask yourself, why do you admire that person? What's going on? And really questioning that. Maybe it's not for the right reasons, but it's worth considering.
When we were talking in our podcast about the book, I was like, yeah, it's something I'm going to do when I'm like 40 or 30. And then you kind of mentioned like, oh, like we always have that because maybe in society, like we were told, like you attend school from this age to this age, you get a job from this age to this age. Can you either speak on that or say something maybe that you're doing in your own life where it's like I'll write a book at 40?
The thing that I'm putting off?
Yeah, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very comfortable right now. If I had a year to live, I'm spending this year going to do, I would say moving to Austin was one thing that I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then literally tomorrow, I'm moving to
That's
Austin.
crazy.
So it's like I feel very in alignment in this moment. Like last night, I was at a restaurant and the waiter comes up to me and is like, "Oh, are you Danny Miranda from the podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool because my personal trainer was this guy named Matt McLeod. And I recognize you from your episode with Matt McLeod." And I was like, "Oh, that's funny. Matt McLeod is going to live like a 5-minute walk from me in Austin."
Wow.
And so it's like those little
What
synchronicities.
an omen. Yeah,
Exactly.
synchronicity.
Those moments I share because it's like you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And I feel as if I am doing everything I can to be the person that I want to be in this moment. And I'm really grateful for that.
That's amazing. Okay, so I have to speak on synchronicities now that you
Please,
mentioned
please.
it, because I feel like I don't want to get too like spiritual or whatever in my podcast.
Why?
Are you a spiritual person? Or
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
What does that look like in your life?
For me, it means connecting deeply to myself and understanding that we're all part of one. We're all like the ocean, in that the ocean it's going to look different in Alaska than it is in New York, but it's still part of the same thing. And us human beings are nature.
Drops in the ocean.
Yeah, drops in the ocean. Exactly. That's how I feel. And that's how and ever since like coming to that realization, I've just been more lighter. I've exuded more, kindness and generosity, because why would I harm another person when that person is myself?
So how did you get to that point, you think?
Meditating.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. Meditating 100%. Just like sitting with nothing makes you really think about those things. And also like reading spiritual texts, reading Eckhart Tolle. A New Earth was my favorite book, is my favorite book.
Really?
Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, and The Surrender Experiment. Unbelievable. They really like shaped me. The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, I love the book.
Like I hope like people.
Words are impeccable.
Yeah, exactly. So like reading those really like sat with me and like made me question things in a way that I never considered, while also doing the work of meditating or like sitting with myself and sitting with my thoughts. Both those combined really made me into somebody who's a knower that we're all in this together.
Okay, I really love that. I love that you gave book examples, because
I'm not that smart.
didn't come to it just for meditating.
Yeah.
What are some other books that you like outside of spirituality?
Yeah. I
What are
mean,
your favorites?
absolutely. So Russ's book, I'm forgetting the name of it off the top of my head, but it's like a yellow cover.
Who's
Russ is an artist,
Okay.
a musician, who basically decided he's going to put out like a song a week until he blows up. And he like had a 10-year music career and like blew up from like basically posting a song a week. And I was very
you
inspired.
made a book out of it?
And he made a book of
I
like
should read that
his
book.
journey.
That's that's pretty much what I would want to do.
Such a short, like you could read it in one day. It's so insightful. It's so inspiring. It's so motivational. He's like, this is what I was like when I was recording this music video. This is what I was like at this moment.
That's really cool.
And it's awesome. So I highly recommend that. And I guess it's spiritual, but it's definitely
Is that RUS? Russ?
RUSS.
Okay, right.
And I don't remember the name
That's fine.
off the top of my head.
It's probably
But
easy to find.
yeah. I just Chasing Excellence by Ben Bergeron. I just interviewed this man, and I've had 280 guests, and this was the first time where a tear came down my eye when someone
Really?
accepted like an invitation to come on. And the reason for that is because I realized that the podcast wouldn't be what it was if I didn't go on a retreat in 5 days in the middle of nowhere and just read his book. Like that was so impactful for me. And then I was like, one day, if I could interview this man, like it would be amazing. And then like 2 years later, like it actually came to be, and I met him, and he like loved the conversation. I was like, oh my God, the world is crazy.
What does your pitch process look like?
Yeah.
People? Like, what did it look like for him?
So right now it's different than what it was when I was just beginning. But right now I normally talk about.
That's okay.
No
It's okay.
worries.
I can edit my podcast.
Deliveries. Let's go.
I'm just gonna keep this in.
Yeah,
You
please.
should put your face in too. Just pop in, say
Pop
hi.
in.
Oh,
I'm over here.
Okay, now we got the whole behind the scenes.
That's amazing.
I need to keep. Okay.
My pitch process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my pitch process is basically like I look at somebody that I want to interview and then I say, who are the people that that person respects and admires?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the network has gotten so big to this point where mainly everyone is connected to somebody that I've interviewed in some way.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, okay, this person follows this person that I've interviewed, like mention that in the pitch. And I think going into the following list is really helpful.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I just like list the podcast, like, you know, like some accolades of the podcast to let people know like this is serious, that I take it serious, and then just maybe like a note about why them specifically. Like people are very flattered when you're like, oh, like I'm interested in you for you.
Yeah.
Another way you could do it is a voice message or like a video to let people know like I took the time out of my day to record a video to you. That's always impactful. But really it's just like showing care to that person and also having no expectations. I don't care about sending out 100 messages to people because I don't care about looking dumb. I don't care about getting rejected. I don't care about any of that because I love myself. And like that person comes on the podcast, great. If they don't, also great. Like truly, like it'll happen when it's supposed to happen or it won't happen at all. So that's a really important piece.
So you said Mike Posner was one of your dream podcasts. Do you have like a connecting point to him?
I do, weirdly enough. And like, yeah, it happened like in a weird way, but I'm super excited for the potential of the manifestation of that. And it's just like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, so if you email pitch, like how long does your email look?
I mean, usually short. Like now, like usually it's like 4 lines. I can read one if you want.
That'd be amazing. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I would love to. Let's get this out. Let's go to the sent messages.
So I think a part of like creating your own reality, which I will also ask you kind of how you do, but it is literally reaching out to people. And I think you can overthink that a lot. And so I'm really interested in how other people, because it kind of is a lot more simpler than you would think.
Yeah, it is simple, right? Like it's just like letting people know you care about them and you appreciate them. So this guy, Austin Kleon, right? Austin Kleon created this book called Keep Going, and he's an incredible...
How to Steal Like an Artist.
How to Steal Like an Artist, right? Exactly.
And show your work.
Exactly. I really appreciate and admire his work.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about books that I'm bringing with me to Austin, Texas. And I was like, oh, wow, like I'd love to bring this one. Keep Going. And then I was like, oh, wow, it says on the bottom that he lives in Austin. So go figure. So then I sent him a quick email yesterday. And I said, hey, Austin, moving to Austin, Texas in 2 days and would love to interview you for my podcast. Previous guests include people like Gary Vaynerchuk, Ali Abdaal, Eric Zimmer, and 280 other incredible creators, entrepreneurs, thinkers. I would love to do it in person. Let me know if interested. Even a response would make my day. Best, Danny. And he hasn't responded, but I don't expect him to or like care. I just shot that out in the wild because you never know. Like, so.
Yeah, I feel like for you and your guests, you would think, you know, maybe crazy. Like that's pretty simple. Like
simple.
It's short and sweet, and I like that.
Yeah. Why not? Why make it more complicated? 17 PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Like, just making more work for yourself and the other person. And it's just like that can work. That is an approach that can work for specific guests in specific moments of like really like going crazy, doing a long pitch. But like really, it's just like people know very quickly if it's a yes or no, and just make it easy for them.
Okay, so the question, I feel like you are very much creating your own reality.
Mm-hmm.
You are interviewing, spending time with people that you admire. What advice would you give to someone to create their own reality other than meditation and looking inward? Like what's some tangible steps?
Yeah. So one thing I did was I created a folder called a mentality folder that I did early on, and I brought it with me I'm bringing it with me to Austin because I'm like, all right, I want to reinstate this practice. And this folder is something my friend Tej gave me and the idea and the template for it. And it's basically like, all right, on the cover is like people you admire or would like to be like. For me, like it was like Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Naval, like people that were on the cover. And then the second page was like values you'd like to have. Like Danny Miranda is this type of person. Another was like the things you would like to accomplish. Another was like photos of like a vision board. Another was like different affirmations. And so like it's probably like a 9 or 10 page document. And I printed out and I read it every morning. And that helped me. Like I look back at some of the things that I wish to have, and it's like things that I'm building in this moment.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting that you had values on it, because more and more now I'm realizing like if you share values with someone, that's all that kind of really matters.
Yeah.
But if you don't share those values, I think you're always going to come into some issues or roadblocks.
Yeah. 100%. And it's interesting because society sets you up based on geography. But what Twitter does and what online communication in general does, it attracts you to the values that you appreciate. And so when you read someone's mind, when you read someone's thoughts, when you read someone's book, when you listen to someone's podcast, you get to know their values through osmosis. And that's more powerful. That's a stronger connection than just being placed in a high school with somebody based on where you're raised.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to ask you your question that you asked me at the end.
I love it.
What did you ask me?
What's a challenge to leave people with?
Okay.
And your challenge was create, right?
Yeah.
On my podcast, you could.
Because somehow that when you were speaking, that somehow reminded me of like the creating part. But okay, I'll just let you answer yours.
Yeah, well, I think a challenge for people is to write out "I love myself" 20 times in a day for 30 days straight. I love myself over and over and over and over and over again. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. Really drown yourself with that idea. What would happen if you drowned yourself with that idea? If that was your predominant thought, not like the thoughts that we have are like, what if I'm not good enough? What if this person does better? What if that person is, what if I love myself was your dominant, not like I'm so full of myself, but what if you loved every part of yourself just as it is? I think and how do you make that true? For me, it was writing it down over and over and over again.
Really?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
You're a big affirmations person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It by Kamal Ravikant, Naval's brother, is a must-read book. Also a short one in terms of like you can understand it very quickly, but one that really changed my life at a deep level. And it was so cool for me, like full circle moment, to be able to interview him.
Wow.
And yeah, and then like he's reached out about the podcast in general. It's been really crazy. Like, and just like this person changed my life and now is asking me for advice on podcast. Like, what is going on?
That's so cool.
But yeah, loving yourself is really important. And I think like affirming that to yourself daily is a challenge that I wish more people would do.
I feel like this is literally like I'm gonna literally read all the books that you recommended because that's the beauty of connecting via the internet. And like we talked about, like you've already curated, your credibility is already there because I just like know what you're putting out. That's very fascinating. So I know that I'll enjoy like every single thing that you mentioned. And I'm glad because I don't think I've read like any of the books that you mentioned. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. And I'll also say like, we put on a pedestal reading in today's day and age. I don't know why. Maybe because it's the oldest form. And I do think that a book is such a beautiful artifact in the sense of it's like well thought out. It's been edited. And maybe that's why. Like it's been edited and it's been thought about for the longest period of time before published.
Yeah.
But I will also say like people consume media very differently. And if you listen to a podcast or you watch a video, that can be just as impactful if you take some action from the activity. And the books that I mentioned aren't a requirement. Like you don't need to feel bad about yourself if you don't read them or whatever. It's just like, it's if it calls to you.
Yeah.
Is what I'll say.
No, I feel like a lot of the books that you mentioned are like very like they have popped up as like omens or whatever in my own life where I'm just like, oh, and it's interesting that you've like mentioned them as well. But I have heard that or been thinking more lately, or like I think you can also read as a form of like, I don't know, I love reading, so I will probably always like read.
Me
but
too.
There is challenge that like you can read as a form of like procrastination or whatever. But
and so I used to think that as well, and then I realized that I'm a studier of communication.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm doing. And how could it be procrastination when I'm studying communication by reading? and I want to write someday, right? Like, or I'm writing now in my newsletter, and like I've always considered myself a writer. It can't be procrastinating if I'm studying the art form for the thing that I do and want to do better. It's like, is a pro basketball player, procrastinating by watching other NBA games? No, of course not.
I like that answer.
So, you know, give it, and that's giving yourself love and coming at it from a different perspective than most people do.
Yeah.
It's like everyone says, you know, reading is procrastination. Or everyone says that, you know, like reading is the best form of media. Well, like, what would life look like with a different perspective? How would that change and increase our ability to understand if we just argued the opposite or added layers onto it?
Yeah.
We're given so many ideas by people. Let's consider them and ask questions about them and look at it from a different perspective. And that's a skill that I learned from just talking to people.
Yeah, that reminds me of our conversation literally in your podcast. I feel while we were talking in this conversation, so many things reminded me of that conversation.
It's beautiful.
So 1,000%, if you're listening to this, you need to go listen to that conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so where can people find you? What's your favorite platform that you have of your own?
Yeah, good question. I think the podcast is my favorite platform, but the problem with the podcast is it doesn't allow comments and interactions, and I love the interactions. I love when someone sends me a message on Twitter, on Instagram, on the YouTube comments. The problem now, it's gotten dispersed because I've started on Twitter. I was only on Twitter for many years, and now it's like become all over the place. But that's all good. Like, that's not a problem. But my favorite one right now is YouTube, probably.
YouTube.
Yeah, because I want to like build a really strong community in the comment section of like people going back and forth, learning from each other, and it's really cool. I think I'm just very appreciative for YouTube, and also like Twitter. I love Twitter as well.
That's funny because I'm trying to get away from YouTube.
And you're trying to
yeah, so I'm not even posting as of now. I'm posting my full videos like on Patreon, and then I'll do shorts like in other places.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that
you've done the YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Like you've experienced
I'm
it
over
too.
YouTube.
You're over it. You've done it. You've experienced it. It's full. Like for me, I was scared to put myself out there, like video wise,
yeah.
because I just didn't love myself fully. I wasn't ready for that yet. And then I, you know, like as I've gotten more into myself, I've been more able to put myself out there in more mediums because I've been like, oh, who cares? But it only started. The only reason I'm putting out video podcasts right now is because I once was just doing written content, and that has slowly progressed. The podcast for the first 38 episodes was audio only, no video.
Really?
And then I was like, all right, let me add a video component, you know? So
how long have you been posting on YouTube?
maybe like since January 2021. So
Okay.
2 years, less than 2 years.
Well, I kind of like that topic too of like this would be the last question. Because I talked about that kind of in yours, like the fear of being seen.
Yeah.
So would you say that you just get over that by loving yourself like fully?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's been a huge part of it for me. And also like witnessing and looking at the challenges that life presents and leading into them. So what I mean by that in practical sense is like episode 39, Gary Vaynerchuk agreed to come on the podcast. And that was like a crazy, fortuitous, you know, omen type event, synchronicity.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, like life has given me this opportunity. Like, let me lean into it by starting video for the podcast. Because I want this to be seen and spread
Yeah.
as much as possible.
And that's symbolic for him too, just being Gary.
Exactly. And then it's like, all right, continue doing that. Like, continue doing a video podcast. And then also, like, another thing I want to mention is like, just trying to make the thing you're doing a little bit better month over month. First, it was an audio only podcast recorded on Skype. Then it was video. Then it was, I added some timestamps to it. Then I did some clips. Then it was like, let me make it in person. And the podcast today is not recognizable to what it was when it started, but it's just like, how do I make this a little better? And if you do that for 10 years, it's hard to imagine that anyone will be unsuccessful at anything.
I guess it's also helpful to look in the reverse because I do look at your podcast and I'm like, oh, I need to do all these
know.
things. And it's
Yeah.
it kind of like, but you could just start, you know, with the basics, just like post, get it out there.
Yes.
Then go into like the description.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not the problem with like having it all, the studio, the clips,
Yeah.
the timestamps, all of it is like people thinking that they need to do that too. No, you need to do that too if that's the natural progression for the thing you want to do. You do you. You do it the way you want to do it. I'm like I'm thinking about, I can't wait to like go through your podcast equipment, and I have a little bit, and I've been like, how do I create a studio at my house? Because that's like, could be a more authentic conversation versus all the lights and all the cameras. It's like, all right, maybe it's just like a one camera setup and just two people holding a microphone.
Yeah.
So I think, it's cool to look at other people and be like, how do I let that inspire my thing, but also like not to be envious or jealous, because I
Yeah.
think that's coming from the wrong place.
Yeah.
Personally.
Well, this conversation was immensely helpful for me. I enjoyed it a lot. I think your conversation, we covered really good topics. So if you're listening to this, 1,000% go listen to Danny on his podcast episode number. And I'm also impressed that you remember like the numbers.
Wait, but I might have got it wrong. Like
Okay.
in terms of
Okay, true.
because
Well, even you referencing like episode number 39, I'm just like, what?
these are impactful moments to me.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and it's like a basketball player, like remembering certain plays. Like it's
Yeah.
just, this is my life. This is all I think about.
Yeah.
This is really important to me, because I really want to get to know people's souls at a deeper level. And the podcast is a means and a vehicle for me to do that. And I'm just immensely grateful for anyone who sits down with me for an hour, anyone who, is willing to share their soul and willing to really analyze their life and really be introspective. And you're definitely one of those people. And so I'm immensely grateful for you, for what you're doing. I hope you continue. I hope you do thousands of episodes if it's appealing to you,
Yeah.
and quit whenever you're ready, and quit whenever you're done, or continue whenever you're done or ready, because you're immensely talented at this. So keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did we say where we can find you? I'll list all your socials and everything.
It's at Hey Danny Miranda on Instagram and Twitter, and send me a message there or leave a comment on YouTube.
Yeah. That'd be fun. Start a discussion.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
That is always the most fun, I think, when I have some pretty insightful viewers.
You do. I brought up some of the
Yeah.
comments to you
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah.
And that's the best part. That's what I really want to get to, is like the YouTube and podcasts are where I'm sharing my heart at a deepest
Yeah.
level. So I want people to watch it and see it, view
Yeah.
it.
I appreciate that because I think that's kind of honestly changing my perspective of how to look at YouTube. It's like a better connecting platform, because I was like, oh, podcast is great because I can avoid all that. But that is like a very special aspect of it. And I guess if you truly love yourself fully, and even going on our conversation in your podcast, there are just like a lot of things that I think can hinder you from wanting that. But I think the answer, yeah, loving yourself fully.
Yes. That's what I hope to leave people with. Writing that down, affirming it to themselves, saying it to themselves in the mirror. I
Yeah.
love myself over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Really changed my life, and I think it could change a lot of people's lives too.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I appreciate you.
This was amazing.
Yeah, it was.